award-winning actor, director, producer, artist, and novelist Mike Messier. Now, Mike is a multifaceted artist. He does all sorts of things. He's worked with great talents like Meryl Streep, Wesley Snipes. He's well known in the entertainment industry and is a true creative. Today, we have the opportunity to pick his brain a little bit and learn about the creative process, learn about what makes him tick, how he becomes such a creative individual. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of his upcoming endeavors. I'm truly honored to have Mike Messier on the podcast with me today. Mike Messier, to quote your movie, right? Your short that night. It's not the Reagan years, and we're not kids. So, Mike, thanks for joining me, man.
Matt, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on the Matt Pierce blog podcast. My name is Mike Messier. I'm in Jacksonville, Florida, and happy to be here.
Hey, you have given your own little introduction there. I like this. You were prepared, man.
This is not my first rodeo. It is with you as my riding partner, so to speak. But I have done podcasts. I've hosted interviews. So I've done this type of stuff, and I enjoy it.
And you've won over 80 awards. This is an incredible amount of awards, it seems like.
Yeah, the funny thing is, Matt, back in maybe 2016, that number was 8. And then I really got into entering film festivals on Film Freeway, which I think came in around that time. And Film Freeway, for those that don't know, it's a film festival platform where filmmakers can find film festivals to enter. And I basically started entering a lot more festivals. And, that would be a whole conversation, but you find out like which festivals are expensive, which are less expensive to enter. Some festivals are free to enter, not many. Film Freeway, it kind of gives a false indicator that maybe all film festivals are free to enter, which is not true, but it's free to set up an account on Film Freeway. Eventually, Matt, I discovered I was spending so much money entering film festivals that I created a film festival of my own, Avalonia Festival of Short Films, etc., which was basically my way of funding the festivals that I was entering myself, So, and creating a film festival, and now I've added 2 more, all comedy short film festival and all horror short film festival, and a Avalonia photography competition, which is an online photography competition. I added all those things to my, repertoire, so to speak. Running a film festival, you kind of learn which film festivals to enter, because now I can kind of look at a film festival, and because I've been on the other side of it, I can say, oh, you know what, this one's worth entering, or this one not so much. And for those out there that might want to be entering film festivals, an indicator for me is the quality of the website. And I take a lot of pride in my websites for my festivals, because I'll actually, if people allow me to, the filmmakers, I'll share their short film, the YouTube link, the Vimeo link, whatever. But a lot of festivals, you're lucky if they even list the winners on the website. So, I mean, I try to go above and beyond my website presentation, because the reality is most filmmakers are not going to be able to attend the festival in person anyway. So if you have this cyber production or the cyber presentation of winners, that's, in my opinion, a good indicator of a good festival.
Yeah. Well, Mike, let's go back a little bit. So you've been involved with these film festivals, and you've done your own film festival, but I'd like you to go back with me a little bit. I want you to talk a little bit about the pivotal moments in your life that led you to pursue a career in the arts, because you're a writer, a director, an actor. You've got your hands in so many different things. What led you, Mike, to a career in creative arts?
I could go back to even, in elementary school, we used to have, I think on Fridays, a playhouse in the classroom of first grade class, which had sandwich bag puppets. And for some reason, that was like my favorite day of the week. I mean, Friday, of course, because the weekend, but then they actually just take these sandwich bags and make puppets out of them and do a little show. And I mean, that's a very obscure, vague memory, but it did count for something, because obviously I enjoyed it. And then in elementary school, my third grade class did a stage play Stone Soup, and somehow I got cast as one of the leads of the two soldiers in this Stone Soup thing, and that was a lot of fun. And then it kind of got buried until the end of high school. As an elective, my high school offered a TV production class, and before I even took that class, I had taught myself how to use 2 VCRs and a boombox to make music videos, and basically grinding on the pause button and the record button. And probably other people have experimented with this, but I was the only person in my school that I know of that was doing that. So when I would bring in these homemade videos and show people, it got some attention, And the TV production class was really cool. And then when I went to college, I was a creative writing major. One of my earlier jokes in a stage play I wrote is, I was a creative writing major in college. I'm qualified to be unemployed. So
that's great.
I have tried, resentfully so, I've tried things like selling insurance or being a cold caller. And at several years, I was a subscription seller on the phone for theater companies in Providence, Rhode Island, where I lived for a long time. And the reality is, Matt, I did that thinking, well, this will somehow lead me to being on stage with this, this group, these highfalutin Trinity Repertory Company in Providence. And the reality is, unfortunately for me, it seemed if you did work for that company in a sales position, you were thought of as a worker bee, not as a creative bee. So they really didn't have many opportunities for anyone unless they paid the money to go to the theater art school. So I just took acting classes, kind of bohemian style. I would just take whatever acting classes I could find. And then there was a time in my life when I was going to Maine Media Workshops in Maine for a lot during the summer times as an actor in residence, which basically means I wasn't getting paid to act, but I was getting room and board, food and shelter, and fun to act in these student films. And there was a particular teacher there named Barry Primus, who was on the TV show Cagney and Lacey. And Barry was in Boxcar Bertha, which was Martin Scorsese's second film. And Barry, I wouldn't say he took an interest in me more than any other person, but I learned a lot from him. And because of him, I started teaching acting myself. So I started teaching a class called, first it was called Acting 101. Then I kind of became the teacher of core acting, which stood for character, origin, response, environment. Audience, character training, instinct, need, greatness. And, I became an acting coach for like 10 years. And just different experiences have led me all over the place. And I feel like as I'm getting older, I'm kind of like going back in time, because I originally started before acting as a writer. And then I started working on Fight or Play Basketball, my novel, and the audiobook. And then after that,
we're going to get to here in a minute. I want to talk about your literary pursuits here in a minute.
Yeah.
But Mike, let me ask you this. When you first started acting, when you first started doing this, and you decided that the arts, this was going to be your life, this is what you wanted to do, what were your initial experiences in acting and filmmaking? Obviously you didn't go the traditional route of going to like film school and all this bullshit that they tell kids they got to do, right? So what were your initial experiences? Like you're a lot like I am. You came up the hard way through this.
Yeah. Probably a lot of my early experiences, Matt, was pro wrestling. Like I was working with a pro wrestling company called Power League Wrestling, where, our audiences, if we were lucky, we'd have 100 people in the audience paying $5, but we actually had a legitimate ring. And, we had some wrestlers that came through that company that went on to do better things. Brutal Bob Evans, went on to Ring of Honor, and a guy I believe was in Power League Wrestling after I left named Fandango, who went all the way to the WWE. But,
Fandango. Yeah.
Right. But basically I was wrestling for free. I wasn't getting paid, but I was having fun. But like being out there in front of an audience and just doing some crazy stuff.
But this is kind of like an introduction, like this is acting in itself, right? Wrestling?
Yeah, because you're basically doing a character and you're doing a presentation, and and it's physical too. So you're doing your own stunts, and the thing with wrestling, and I'm a big lifelong wrestling fan, but for me, we weren't being trained properly. I think Brutal Bob was the only one that showed us anything. But, I really made the decision, like, I love wrestling and I would like to be involved professionally, but I don't want to be a professional wrestler because I didn't really trust my body enough not to get hurt. And I had seen enough wrestling where I knew that people do get hurt. And I've never been someone that was a star athlete or anything. So I just said, okay. But around that time, like in college, and I was in college for 7 years, man, I transferred and lost a bunch of credits. So I had an extended college career. But during college, I was a singer for a rock band for a grand total of 2 shows, the first show, the last show. I did spoken word poetry for a while. I tried my hand at stand-up comedy. So I just kind of, and the good thing with Providence, Rhode Island, which I've since moved away from Providence, but there was a lot of things creatively. It was kind of like a really good farm system. Like you wouldn't get paid a lot, but if you wanted to try stand-up comedy, there was stand-up comedy scenes to go to. If you wanted to try spoken word, you could go to this place called AS220 or the Mondo Cafe, like these places that don't even exist anymore. But there were places that I wouldn't say they would, roll out the red carpet, but if you came in and you were honest and said, hey, I want to try stand-up comedy, nobody was really stopping you. Like I said, there was not a big payoff for any of this stuff, but at least you could get your reps in.
Yeah. And, and that's kind of how Austin is. Austin, I'm here in Texas, and Austin is kind of the same way. It's not really a high dollar kind of place, where you're going to make a ton of money in the arts industry, but you can make a pretty good living here. And, you're a very humble guy, Mike Messier. You're very humble to your roots, but in reality, you've worked with some pretty high name actors, some really great talent. You were with Meryl Streep in Hope Springs. You were with Wesley Snipes in Hard Luck. What is it like working? What insights do you have from working with these kind of A-list talents?
Well, I could give you a little bit of an interesting story. All the stuff that I just mentioned and leading to working with Wesley Snipes specifically, all that stuff I mentioned about the stuff I was doing in college as a bohemian type of I'll do anything. The stand-up comedy, the rock and roll singing, taking an acting class and having somebody videotape, my final scene for the acting class and all this stuff I compiled onto a VHS tape at the time. But I actually had somebody help me make a movie, which was called I Deserve to Be a Celebrity was the name of it. And this gentleman, Richard Houlihan, helped me edit this stuff. And this was around 2001 or 2002. And I had this, a copy of the tape that I sent to this lady named Annie Mulhall, who she was a stand-up comedian herself for a few years, and she had worked on Mad TV in Los Angeles, and she was back in Rhode Island. I think she had a parent that wasn't doing well, physically. So she was in Rhode Island, and she basically set up camp as a casting director because at the time, Rhode Island was just getting some stuff like TV show Brotherhood and the movie 27 Dresses with Katherine Heigl, and Steve Carell filmed Dan in Real Life there. So she set up camp as a casting director because there was no casting directors in Rhode Island. So she saw an opening, she made the niche for herself, and I saw her do stand-up comedy, and at the end of her set, she said, hey everybody, my name is Annie, and I'm just starting my own casting company, and if anyone is an actor here, get in touch with me. So I did. I think I got her business card, or I just audio heard where she was, and I sent her a copy of this VHS tape that I had made, which at this point was maybe a year or two old. And I have this vision that like at maybe 3:00 in the morning, she couldn't sleep and she put on the VHS tape and she watched me doing all this crazy stuff, the wrestling, the stand-up comedy, the spoken word. And then 2 years after that, approximately, is when I got a phone call from her. And I had just started training for MetLife Insurance, which you can imagine that I hated. And she called me and she said, Messier, Messier, I've got an audition for you for a Wesley Snipes movie. Call me back. So I got this message, and of course I called her back, and I went to audition, which, was only 20 or 30 minutes away. And then I basically auditioned 4 times, Matt, and the movie was called Hard Luck. If people look it up, I think it's the 2006 or 2007 Hard Luck. Louise Guzman's in it. Mario Van Peebles, his father, Melvin Van Peebles, Wesley Snipes, and Sybil Shepherd. And basically, I auditioned up until they were already making the film, and they were still auditioning me because they couldn't decide, or specifically Mario Van Peebles couldn't decide between me and a guy that was like 6'8". And eventually Mario showed the footage to Sybil Shepherd, and Mario told me this himself, that Sybil chose me over the other gentleman to play her son. So, I mean, that was nice. So it seems like, if some of the people in New England, that I wouldn't say they were jealous, but kind of curious, or maybe jealous or envious, like, how did Messier get that break? Well, I put about 5 or 7 years into stand-up comedy, spoken word poetry, pro wrestling shows that didn't pay, and everything else. And then I worked for 1.5 years to make a movie about all these experiences. And then I gave it to the person that 2 years later would have the opportunity to have me audition. And then I got the role. So, I mean, that's how I got into Screen Actors Guild, at least. And that's how that opportunity with Snipes and Mario and Sybil took place.
And sometimes getting into SAG, Screen Actors Guild, sometimes that can open some doors for you, and sometimes it can't, right? But it all comes back. Really, you've been in this business long as I have. And Mike, it all comes down to networking, doesn't it? It's a lot of who you know, right?
Yeah, and that's one thing I've discovered, Matt, is since I've moved to Jacksonville, Florida, and maybe I was, I really just had to get away from the winters up in New England. But the reality is I haven't made as many connections in Florida as I would have hoped. But what I've done with my energy, because I'm really not making many films these days, is I started doing a YouTube channel during the pandemic. I started, adapting some of my screenplays into novels. Like, I had written, here's a thing, I've written screenplays, and as any screenwriter will tell you, it's not as easy. It's really hard to write a screenplay, and it's about 1,000 times harder to get that screenplay made into an actual film.
100%. That's so true. That is so true. And let's talk a little bit about these novels and some of your literary pursuits, because sure. I was reading A Distance from Avalon, and I started reading Fight or Play Basketball, right? Discuss with me, Mike Messier, the thematic elements that go into creating this. Like, what is your thought process, especially A Distance from Avalon? I thought this was a great read.
I appreciate that.
What goes into writing a book? What is the thematic elements that go behind this?
So A Distance from Avalon was written really in a reverse type of way. And I will tell you that the first origins of that script came in 2013. Specifically, I was invited to we're getting kind of hardcore now, Matt, but yeah, so I'm going to tell you. A friend of mine through a church invited me to what I thought was a men's retreat for like a church thing. And the long and the short of it is it was a cult, which I wasn't informed of until I got into the middle of rural Pennsylvania at this campground.
Oh no, man. And come on, really?
Suddenly I'm like, seeing Tom Cruise with a branding iron, Nexus or whatever it is. And it
like
wasn't
Bohemian Grove shit.
Yeah. It basically was. So, I mean, I, as the kids say, I literally went screaming out of there in the middle of the night because it was getting real weird. And so a couple of weeks later, when I, survived and I got home in one piece, I started writing. I was in a writers group, which is really a good writers group. We had about 5 people, and I think we did it like 3 times a month. Like, we had a really tight group of writers, and I found myself writing this piece called Disregard. And I don't really know. I think I didn't realize it till later, Matt, that this story was coming from my cult experience, because the idea, as you read in what's now called A Distance from Avalon, there's basically a trick. A guy named Joe, who's described as an average Joe with a chip on his shoulder. He's a school teacher. At the time I was teaching acting, he goes on a date with a younger woman, and they find themselves at this castle where these 2 vampires. And at the time I was saying, which is still true, that the movie Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice from the 60s, The Sexual Revolution, which was about partner swapping. My idea was, what if the initiation, vampires initiating their victims through a partner swap, like they're using the sexual deviancy to bring in the vampire stuff. But the subtext of all of this was, I had been misled by a friend to go to what I thought was a men's Christian retreat, which turned out to be a whacked out cult. So that subtext is what is in the story. On a technical level, sort of, I Disregard was what I had written. I got together with 3 other guys. We were going to make a low budget movie called Disregard the Vampire. And
I was going to ask you about this.
Right. So Disregard the Vampire was filmed in March of 2014. After our first day of filming, the lead actor had to drop out. There was a death in his circles. He could no longer do the movie. We had to punt. We got a rock and roll singer to take his place. We lost about half our filming time. We were already on a really ambitious schedule. And so basically that footage was not, and we had bad audio on top of it. That footage was not enough to make the feature film that we set out to make. But I had already taken a few $1,000s from other people, and I was determined to show something for it. So basically, for the next 3 years, I made a documentary called Disregard the Vampire, a Mike Messier documentary, which is basically a documentary on the footage that we filmed that wasn't completed into a feature film. Now I've got that done. At the same time, I start taking the Disregard the Vampire script, and I start rewriting it into A Distance from Avalon, kind of learning the lessons from Disregard and saying, okay, well, I saw actors, like I auditioned people, I cast actors. The Disregard the Vampire Mike Messier documentary is on YouTube. It's on Vimeo. People can watch it for free. That's won 13 awards of various kinds. But I started having experienced these scenes, at least partially. Then I went back and started taking the screen, like first I rewrote the screenplay of Disregard the Vampire into A Distance from Avalon. Then I rewrote it again and again several times. And then I started thinking, well, let me write this as a stage play, because if I can get this on stage, then I can use the same actors on stage as I do on film. And then that didn't happen. And then I said, okay, well, the stage play is not happening. Now I'll just translate it to a novel. So I started doing that. And that was around 2017. And in the meantime, I was realizing, man, I got to get the heck out of Rhode Island. I can't live here anymore. And that was a real conscious decision. Like all of these unfinished projects that I've been working on, like this, Disregard the Vampire, if I move out of Rhode Island, I'm going to lose some of these connections. But the reality was people were kind of losing interest anyway. Even though the documentary was well received and all that, some of the original Disregard the Vampire actors were no longer returning phone calls or whatever. So I made the personal decision for my own sanity and to move to the South, to move to Florida. And I did. And then when, like I said, I was really excited about, okay, I'm going to move to Florida, meet all these new people, blah, blah, blah. Then the good old pandemic hit. And then I'm like, I guess it's just me again. So what can I do as an artist on my own? And the answer comes back to writing. You know, like they can't take that away from you. You know, like if you've got fingers and you've got a computer or a pen and a paper, you can always write for free. Whereas filmmaking, you need some money and some other people. And that's when I started taking these screenplays. And the first one was A Distance from Avalon. And I started translating it into a novel. So the novel that you're reading now, Matt, is basically based on it's a novel based on a stage play and a screenplay that was based on a movie that's also based on a documentary that's based on a movie that didn't get finished to completion. So that's,
you remember the great journalist, gonzo journalist Hunter S. Thompson? He did Fear and Loathing. Yeah. Mike, you kind of remind me of this Hunter S. Thompson kind of character. Like you're just really enthralled in all of these things that you do, and they just consume you. And it seems like you do so many of them so well, right? Like it seems like you do. I mean, you're a guy that's won 80 freaking awards, more than 80 awards for your work. How do you get here? What does a guy like you do to get here to this place?
That's a good question, man. I think it's just keep trucking. I mean, I mean, if you want to get real metaphysical, I mean, I mean, if you believe in reincarnation, at times I have, at times I haven't. I mean, one thing, I mean, I guess the humble thing is part of it, but I mean, right now I'm dog sitting, like as we're talking, and I'm like, wow, even dog sitting is like a lot of work. Like,
Yeah.
like this dog is like, I went to the Dollar Tree and I bought him treats, and I went away for a minute and I put the treats and all this stuff on the counter, and then I started hearing this grumbling. Matt, within 3 minutes, the dog had jumped on the counter, ripped open the bag of treats. And
Oh no, man! No way, man!
I got him outside now because I'm like, I know this dog is going to get sick, so I don't want him getting sick. So the point is, I don't have a dog full time. I don't have kids full time. I don't have any kids, and I think that, to me at least, and I know that other, like Francis Ford Coppola said otherwise, but for me,
Yeah.
If I had the wife and the kids, I don't think I could do this stuff. And it's not an insult to anybody with wife or kids or husband and kids or anything, or dogs or cats. But the reality is I do have a lot of time that I can kind of call my shots. And I fully realize that people that do have a family don't have the time that I do. And that's a choice. I mean, that's a choice, and times that can be lonely, and it can be really isolating. And for my painting, I've become a person that I'll go to a coffee house with a huge bag of paint markers and canvas boards. And whether it's Starbucks or a local coffee house, I'm painting there because at least there's some human interaction. And it's kind of an invitation for people to talk to me, because I wouldn't say I'm the shyest guy in the world, but I'm not going to go up to people and just start talking to them looking for friends. But my painting in public, which is kind of a random thing, most people have their headphones on and their laptops on, and I did that for decades. But the
Mike,
public.
tell me about this Avalonia Festival of short films. Tell me about this.
I started that in 2017, and like I said, I was spending not tons of money, but say $100 a month to enter film festivals. And that's maybe, a bit much, but I mean, some festivals, the good ones, like not to say the good ones, but some of them, say if you want to enter Sundance, you're looking at $60 minimum, you know what I mean? And there's about a 0.5 chance you're going to get accepted. So, but if you're a filmmaker and if you put a year or two into making a film like I have, you're probably going to want to enter Sundance because you feel, and it's kind of a sickness, you feel like you owe it to yourself, and you owe it to your cast and crew. Like, hey, everybody put their time and effort into this thing. Am I really not going to spend the $60 to take my lottery ticket to get into Sundance or Robert De Niro's Festival Tribeca and so forth? And, I was spending that money on these festivals. And also at the same time, I was hosting, at the time it was called the Brooklyn Coffee and Tea House local film night in Providence, Rhode Island. There was a Brooklyn Coffee and Tea House in Providence. So I'm hosting the film night and basically getting maybe 20 or $25 a shot to host, because the owner of the place was nice. But they're charging $5 a cover and he's giving me $20. So that's fair. But then I kind of clicked in like, hey, the amount of work that we're putting into this local film night is not too much less than if I actually ran a film festival. You know what I mean? And I had been to some good film festivals and noticed like, hey, this is a really good film festival. They advertise, blah, blah, blah. And about 10 people show up for the screening. So my theory was, do I really need to rent a venue that's very expensive, like a huge auditorium, to run a film festival? Or can I run my festival at this local coffee house, which has a 40-person screening room and a nice screen, and everyone has a good time there for these local film nights? Could I run a pretty modest festival and make a few bucks? And the answer was yes. So for the first 3 years, I did my film festival in Rhode Island. And Avalonia, the tie-in to A Distance from Avalon is because in the story A Distance from Avalon, the Avalonia is mentioned. And what Avalonia is in reality is it's a chunk of land that drifted into the ocean that was connected to Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. So that's kind of like Atlantis. So that's how I got the word Avalon, and that's how Avalonia Festival came to be. And the other thing, Matt, was that for the first several years, and now Avalonia is on its 10th season, when people went to the Avalonia Film Festival website, they also saw a mention of me and my novel. So basically, I was creating a film festival to promote my own novel, and which is also a screenplay.
Much like the music industry, these guys are going on tour to support, their album, right? It's kind of the same way. But help me understand, Mike Messier. Help me understand the role that Avalonia plays in promoting these independent filmmakers like yourself. What role does it have?
I think, here's what I really think it is. I think the website is nice. If people go to my website, I will put the actual film if the filmmakers permit me to, and if they want me to. That's an opt-in. That's not a necessary thing, but I'll put their film poster, their trailer, the actual film on the, and hopefully the idea is if enough of the filmmakers who win an award share the website to show off, then that kind of, it's like a networking, like an octopus. Like the more filmmakers that actually share the URL and say, hey, my film won the award from Avalonia, you can check out the other award-winning films. Hopefully there's some networking that happens through the website. You know what I mean? And then I do a live event as well. I mean, the live events happen and people can come to that. And then I think the other thing is if you really want to, I didn't realize this until 6 or 7 years into running a festival. What purpose does a film festival do? The reality is I don't think anyone's going to come to Avalonia Film Festival and meet Steven Spielberg or George Lucas or whoever and get a film career taken to the 10th degree because they went to the Avalonia Festival in Florida. But I think what does happen is, especially with filmmakers that maybe don't have a lot of credits, or they're younger filmmakers, or they're even at an older age just getting started, what they get from winning an award at Avalonia Festival or All Comedy Short Film Festival or All Horror Short Film Festival, they get the pat on the back that they probably didn't get from dad. I think in our country, in our times, mom's hug, mom's love is pretty common, but that, attaboy thing that people look for from their dad doesn't really happen. So I think that a film festival kind of gives people that feeling of accomplishment that, hey, I'm doing something that somebody thought was of value. And it's not just me. I do have a judge, Kazuya, who's actually in Japan. So the two of us are kind of judging these films. So if people do win an award from one of my festivals, they know that at least 2 people in the world who have some experience think that they're doing something of value. And that actually, just knowing that means a lot to people, surprisingly, perhaps.
Mike, share with me some insights into the future. Give me a glimpse of what the future looks like for Mike Messier. What are you working on right now?
I'm working on my art, man. I'm really working on my art, Matt. You know what I mean? Like if people go to MikeMessier.com and see, short, they can see that I'm working on my artwork, and I'm still working on like doing this podcast with you to promote Fight or Play Basketball. I would love for this movie to actually take place. Like the reason why the book exists is because I'm still trying to get that made into a feature film. So I would really love for everything to kind of come together, and A Distance from Avalon to be made into a feature film, Fight or Play Basketball to be made into a feature film. And, but in the meantime, I'm doing the artwork because at least with that, it's very quick. You know what I mean? I can sit there for an hour and make a pretty good painting and feel good about it, and maybe even sell it, or at least put it on a TikTok video, a collage of different artwork. But if I'm writing a novel, I might be there for 7 or 8 or 9 years working on it. So,
Mike, you're kind of like I am. You came up the hard way, right? You came up the hard way. And in a lot of ways, guys like you and I are still coming up, and we'll probably always be trying to come up, right?
Yeah.
But let me ask you, what are some insights or advice that you would give to a 20-year-old Mike Messier who's looking to enter the entertainment industry today, as different as it is from when you and I entered this world? What advice would you give some 20-year-old?
In a sentence, I'd say make yourself famous on YouTube. You know, like have an interesting niche, and wherever you are, I would say it's probably less expensive to stay where you are and put the time and the effort into making a really, if not YouTube, Rumble, if not Rumble, Blue Sky, TikTok, whatever, some type of social media platform. Because I've actually had some trouble with YouTube lately, but I would say use social media to really put together a killer presentation of yourself. Don't necessarily move to Los Angeles, New York, or Chicago unless you can really afford it. And just make yourself famous using your phone. And I would say that, you know, the Paul brothers, that I'm not terribly big fans of, or a fan of either one of them, but they did it. I mean, they were, I think, in the middle of nowhere, and they kind of made themselves famous. And I think there's something to be said for that. And
Look at fucking Casey Neistat, dude. Look at Casey Neistat, man. He does all this very simple edits, very simple presentations. And, you know, I think, Mike, I really do believe this. The barriers to entry and the gatekeepers are slowly starting to fall down. With you mentioned YouTube and stuff like this, Twitch, whatever it is, right? Independent film festivals. Used to, when you and I started this, man, there were a lot of gatekeepers, and there's still a hell of a lot of gatekeepers in this industry. But cameras are cheap these days.
Yeah.
You can pick up a good camera for $1,000, and you can make a movie with this. You can make a movie with your phone, you know? The barriers to entry are much lower than what they were when you and I first started this. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, my first stuff, you know, when I was telling you about that stuff in college, that was all on a VHS camera, like the whole tape, like the big clunky VHS. But it took an image, and you know, 5 or 6 years later, was it the DCR 2000 or the VXX 2000, the Sony? You know what I mean? I like me and a friend at college, George Lamastro, made a movie called Man and You. We spent a year and a half making a movie with absolutely no money. You know what I mean? And that was a learning experience. So I mean, but yeah, the point of entry is really like, there's really not much. If you have a phone with a camera and you have internet access, you can go for it. As far as being good, as far as actually, like, if you want to act where you actually have some chops, I would recommend my book. You know, I have a book with a long-winded title, but if you look up Mike Messier on Amazon, one of my books is, you know, how to get involved in student and low-budget filmmaking and acting. And I have a bunch of monologues in there that I've written, and a bunch of stories, like stories, you know, tales from the foxholes, so to speak, stories, and some advice. So I have a book that has some advice. As far as acting goes, my big 3 books that I always advise are Audition by Michael Shurtleff. There's one, The Power of the Actor by Ivana Chubbuck, and The Intent to Live by Larry Moss. So, I mean, as far as, like, if you want to be a great actor, take an acting class. You know what I mean? Take several. I think at the same time that I said, if you just want to make yourself famous, or if you want to get your name out there, then the YouTube stuff. If you want to actually be good, or if you want to be great, then take some classes. And I think that's probably where a lot of people fall off, because a lot of people just they just want to be the cute person on TikTok dancing around in a circle with a pizza or whatever. But if you actually want to be a great actor, then start taking some classes, do a stage play where you're acting for 3 weekends in a row for no money. You know what I mean? And that's where people will start falling off, because they won't want to do that. You know,
when they start hitting the objections, they tend to fall off pretty quick. Mike Messier, you're an incredible talent. You're an incredible creative, absolutely fascinating conversation. Thank you, man. Thanks for coming on here, man. I really appreciate it.
This has been an honor, man. And if you ever come out to Jacksonville, or if I ever get to Austin out there again, then we should meet up in person. In the meantime, I hope everyone enjoys your podcast and checks out Matt Pierce blog podcast and supports your show. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And likewise, I'll link to your website and to some of your content below in the description as well. I think it's great. I think us independents really have to stick together and support each other, especially in such a monetized world. I think independents need to network and stick together now more than ever. Yeah. Mike, thank you for being here, man.
Thanks, Matt.